evening, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming. I know it's of all the nights we don't have it scheduled at the Council on Aging is tonight, and we have more room there, and I apologize. We thought this was going to be candidates night, but we are going to have our candidate. We do have one candidate here who's running for re-election, Janet Reinhardt, and our other candidate, Mike DeVasto, is going to be at our pre-town meeting to introduce himself and say a little bit of something of why he wants to be selectman and his vision and all those good things. I am Sheila Lyons. I am the president of the Wellfleet Forum. We are a board that was created in 1997 during a contentious era of Wellfleet. It's probably hard to believe. And they decided that this is a good place to come together so that we can have our disagreements and listen to each other and really come down and have a conversation and not take things personally and hopefully solve the problems that are confronting our town and ourselves. So with that, we hope to build a better and happier and stronger community. And so all those rules apply for tonight, and this will be a healthy, good discussion, one of learning. John Morrissey, I want to thank, he is on my board, and some of my other board members are here, Dick and Esther, and Mary Fox, and Kurt Felix, Tom Cole, Dick Guernsey, Mary Ruth Seidel, myself, and David Wright. And if I'm missing somebody, I'm sorry. I think I got everybody. And anyway, so that is the team, and they do great work, and everybody partakes in all of these forums. But John did do a lot of yeoman's work on this. He was a former selectman, and it kind of bothered him that there was a lot of questions even he didn't really think about or know after being a selectman. So he is the one who wrote these questions down for something that he wanted to know and submitted them to the Board of Selectmen and the administration. So that's where you got the answers straight from the horses right here behind me, mouths. So they are a very helpful background for us just to understand the industry, and you may be thinking to ask one of the questions in there, so you can take a quick look at them. It's a good education, and they are on our website at wellfleetforum.org, and you go to where our emails are, and you will find this document if you don't have one with you tonight. The other thing I want to say is that we do have 2 more forums coming up that we have already scheduled. One is a week from tonight, April 16th. It's a week from... It is April 16th. It might be a week from yesterday. It's a Tuesday. Okay, so it's Tuesday, April 16th, and that is 7 o'clock, and that will be our pre-town meeting where we will go over the entire warrant. Dan Silverman is here, our moderator, and he basically kind of sets up what the discussions are about, and this is what this question means. This is what this question's asking you. So it's not really a debate session, it's really an informative and understanding what the questions are on the warrant. And then on May 13th, Outer Cape Health Services is going to come and do a presentation that will also be at the Wellfleet COA, and on their new facility and all of their facilities and their new, really kind of pumped up organization and what they have to offer us that's brand new in the building and in the community at large. So we're excited about that. We are looking at future summer. We're going to do a joint meeting with the non-resident taxpayers over the summer, and we will be talking about sharks soon. We'll be bringing up those questions and ideas and various other things. So it's getting late and lots to do, and some of you are standing, so I apologize. All right, to get on with this, again, I wanted to thank John Morrissey. He is not here tonight because he came down with the flu and he feels very badly, but I do want to thank him and hope he feels better. So I'm going to start off with one question that I'm going to present to this panel, and basically that question is going to be, how did this property come to your attention? What was the process of that, and kind of what has been done so far? What was your thinking? And then I'm going to open it up so you can get an explanation here, and then we'll open it up for questions, if that sounds good. So with that, I'm going to give it to this table, since this is where it all began, as far as I can understand. So thank you, everyone, again for coming.
I'm Nancy Chivetta, the Shellfish Constable for the town of Wellfleet. I thought I'd start just by saying what I believe. And I believe that the town should buy all of the HDYLTA Trust property. It represents a third of the aquaculture revenue for the town of Wellfleet, and about a third of the people making their living here year-round. And we should not let it be privatized. There's something in Mass General Law that specifies that shell fishing activities and oversight are in the public domain, and oversight and supervision is delegated, management is delegated to the towns. And we need to keep that bottom, those intertidal lands, in the public domain. It's part of the public trust doctrine of the colonial ordinances. And I feel very strongly that the town should buy it all. It needs to remain under home rule. And when you think about what those owners did when they bought it, are any of the owners here tonight?
This is all the Indian Neck area.
Yes.
So I have a bunch of questions about this.
Okay. I just wanted to know if one of the owners was in the room tonight. Okay. I believe that the owners should be fairly compensated for their investment. They went through a lot. They put up money. They guaranteed access for a couple of decades now for farming out there. And I do believe that they deserve to be compensated for it. And I hope that with negotiations, the town and the trust will be able to find something that is mutually beneficial and that makes sense. Certainly, the stability out there, so people who are farming out there can count on the fact that they will continue to be able to farm out there. We need that stability in our town. And I think that's worth the price that we'll eventually pay. I want it to be in the best interests of the town, just like all of you. I pay taxes here, so I am hoping that we will find a way to arrive at a figure that makes sense. That's all I have to say for right now. But I believe we should buy it. I think it's in the best interest of the town. We should not let it become privatized. We need to keep it in the public domain, under home rule.
So I want, before I start giving you some factoids, I'm Helen Randall-Wilson. I'm on the select board, and Nancy Chavetta and I have been working very closely, to produce the document, and also to try to start getting information out about this incredible opportunity that's on the same level as something like Mayo Beach was, and the two big lots, one of which the school is on now, and the other one of which is across, it's where the ball field is. There have been few things like this in the history of Wellfleet that have become available for purchase in one way or another. The library was another thing that the town took over that has become an enormous benefit. I'd like to show you something first. Gabrielle, can you put the video on, please? It's brief. It's a drone's eye view of what we're talking about. And some of you know where this is, but not everybody does. And somebody who, Justin Lynch, sent his drone up this spring. And I didn't want any music. I'm not trying to sell you anything. But no, you get a sense of what the scope of this is. This is far enough up so you are protecting the privacy of the people that are maybe out on there working, so you can't see their bandanas. But this property includes over a mile of beach that is contiguous with Burton Baker Beach, which is also another property that was obtained by the town. And access could be through Burton Baker Beach, so there's access. And it goes all the way around, and we're now moving, we're moving south, looking back north. And it goes all the way around the tip of Field Point. Nancy said that a third of our shellfishing aquaculture area, in other words, area under cultivation is there, it's also one of the most productive areas for wild harvesters who make up a lot of the people that support themselves in part or completely from shellfishing here. It's all sandy bottom, and everything that isn't already aquaculture grants, as you'll read in the document, is available to the wild harvesters, whether we buy this or not. In other words, by right, they get to fish there. But arguably, actually, in fact, the wild fishery, which is the whole area in the main between where those grants are and the shore, is enhanced by the fact that all those farms are out there. You know, with shellfish spawning on them, with shellfish being, washed off a bit. And I just wanted you to see that. I'd like to supply a couple of facts that aren't in the document. As some of you know, when we go over Prop 2.5, which we have to vote on at the ballot too, it can be an override, which means that it permanently raises our taxes. This article is not that kind of article. Once the debt is paid, it's paid. In other words, you have to borrow, you pay it over time, and the document includes a breakdown of how that affects things, which I wish we did with every article like that. But, it's okay. But the other thing about it is, unlike, say, the $7 million that we spent on a police station, which I'm not saying wasn't worth it, and the more than that, how many $1 million, I forget, we spent on the police fire station, once we pay this off, there is no infrastructure repair. So this is public benefit. It's used by the people who work here, who are at the economic center of the town. I'm very practical about this. I love the fact that I grew up here, and it's a tradition of shellfishing, and it's a good way to make a living, and we have an amazing resource. But right now I'm on the select board, so I'm intensely practical. Having this area, as the constable just said, stable, so that we don't have people buying and selling, that area, those aquaculture farms, and restricting those purchases to people who have more money, not just people who can farm well, who want to have a small farm, and who have less economic means, but restricting it to people who have only, more money. And people buying grants is something that there really is no ceiling on that as we go forward. 3 of the acres there have been sold for $20,000 apiece. More could be gotten for them. And in other communities, this goes on, either under the table or over the table. And one of the reasons that this is happening now is that this is building in other places and perhaps also building here. And everything the constable said is true. We need this area to be stable. We need it to be available to people who are willing to use it responsibly in compliance with our regulations, and not just people who have more money and who could come in and buy the bottom. They wouldn't even have to live here. We need the farmers who use it to be the farmers who have management of their own farms in compliance with our regulations and state law. So now I'm going to, stop talking, but I hope you'll all read the document. We put a lot of work into it.
I'll speak up for just a second. Dan Ford, I'm the town administrator. This has come up very recently. Not exactly the preferred method to do it, but once the opportunity presented itself, I looked at this as it's preserving the culture of Wellfleet, the characteristics of our town in which a small shell fisherman or woman can get a license and get a grant and make a living out on our flats. We wanted to preserve that capability and not make it so that you had to have deep pockets to be able to afford to purchase the flat that you're working on and then get your license. So we wanted to make it available and keep it available as we do right now for anyone who is a Wellfletian and wants to work out on the flats and have their own farm to work there. So my role as town administrator is really to collect as many of the facts as I can as possible, is to negotiate the best possible deal that I can with the current owners of the property, and then bring it forward to you and let you make the decision. Ultimately, it's your decision on whether you want to go forward on this or not. You want to say anything?
So I'm completely for buying this also. I don't like the price. I don't think anybody likes the cost. However, we have not negotiated at all. We haven't even talked yet. As Dana said, that I think this came up, the idea of it came up 3 weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. We had a meeting with the rest of the select board and the public. And we're working really hard on getting a handle on this. Nancy, Helen, Dan are working very hard trying to get all the answers needed. One of the things I wanted to say is about what it would mean to your taxes. And on the high end, if we didn't get to negotiate down, this would be about $65 a year on your tax on a median single family home. I believe a median single family home in Wellfleet is still about $500,000. Is this right? This is right. Yeah. And so that's $65 a year. And if we negotiate more, it'd be like $42 a year. There was a figure out earlier, and that included all of the expenses on the town warrant, okay, and even more. So I think everybody here honors, loves Wellfleet, and we love it because of its natural beauty, of the open space. We don't like change. Who wants change, right? No, we hate things changing, right? Because we like it the way it is, and it is beautiful. And this is protecting it. This is preserving it for futures. We know that many of the shellfishers hand their grants down in the family. You know, where can there be 3 generations working in this town? Not that many places, and they have been. And I think I'll open up for questions, but yeah, oh, and I also wanted to say we're starting a gift fund. And I think we should start a gift fund for the whole town. That'll be a town meeting. But we are starting a gift fund because this is a big prize. But, you know, it might work. It might defray a few costs. So I am not going to moderate questions. Who wants to moderate?
I guess I will moderate questions, but I'm going to ask Tom, how are we best going to have people speak? We don't have a microphone in the front.
Just speak up.
All right, so try to speak as loudly as you can, and please state your name. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm going to stand up. And my name is Stephen Greenberg. I'm a homeowner on Indian Neck, Field Point. I want to say, first of all those houses you saw in that picture are houses owned by people who are part of the Field Point Property Owners Association. And I'm a little shocked that you didn't reach out to the association, considering the impact that this has on us. And I'm going to say a few things because we've been researching this very issue. And this is not an uncomplicated issue. First of all, that subdivision, which we live, which we call Field Point, was subdivided in 1959. It was created by a company which no longer exists, which, based on my research, had 3 shareholders. That company long since ceased to exist. It was dissolved, basically, because it stopped operating. I have a real question in my mind whether or not, and you can answer this, whether anybody has really determined whether this trust actually has good title to this property. And I will tell you the reason I'm raising this question. I've been a lawyer for 49 years. I'm retired now. I was a member of the New York and Pennsylvania bar, so I'm not an expert in Massachusetts law, but we've been doing a fair amount of research on it. When a corporation dissolves, after its debts are paid, its assets pass on to its shareholders. And they are literally become the owners of the properties that the corporation owns. All right, now, in reading some material, it looks like all the three shareholders are now deceased. And this trust went and paid for $25,000 from what appears to be one shareholder. If that's the case, they never got good title to this property, or certainly not full good title to the property. So I'm questioning whether anybody before $3.5 million or something like that is paid, that somebody confirms that these people really have good title to the property. Secondly, the association was formed in 1976. We have been using that beach as our own beach, and if you looked at the subdivision, it was part of the subdivision for all those years. Now, there's a concept in law called adverse possession. I question whether or not these guys have the right to go and yank out from under us what we've been using and maintaining all these years. Now, the question of the shell fishermen has come up many times in meetings we have an annual meeting and some other meetings. And we voted unanimously, except for one person, to allow the shell fishermen to use the beach. The access to the beach is in two areas. One is a road that's part of our property, and the other one is the end of King Philip Road, which is, again, that portion of King Philip Road is our property. So the only two accesses to that beach goes through property owned by the Field Point Property Owners Association. So this whole issue, to me, it needs to be heavily researched before anybody goes ahead and undertakes to pay millions of dollars. The people who pay $25,000 and may not even receive good title. Now, I'm going to add one other thing to all this. We don't have a problem with the shell fishermen. The shell fishermen come and go, and there was this gentleman by the name of Masari who was long since ceased being, I hear you, some people probably know him. He filed a lawsuit to go and prevent the shell fishermen to have access. I showed him in the maps that he would not own that property. The riparian rights were not granted as part to individual owners. It was a line, and it was very clear. He lost in Barnstable, he lost before the Court of Appeals, and he lost before the Supreme Judicial Court. After he blew up, he sold his house and left. Now the question as to who actually owns that property, I think is a very key question. And I will tell you something, that we're not going to sit by and let people run roughshod over us. That property is something that we've used for years, we've maintained for years. Again, we don't have an issue with the shell fishermen. But we certainly are not going to sit by and simply say, hey, some guy paid $25,000 to somebody, and now he claims to have ownership, or this trust claims to have ownership. And all of a sudden, all that beachfront and everything that we've used and occupied for all these years is no longer, is owned by somebody. And if you guys don't get the money to pay it, who then does own it? Now, I want to make clear, we're not going to fight the shell fishermen. We're perfectly happy with the shell fishermen. They have their grants. The law covers their grants. Our issue is that beach and the riparian rights onto the beach. So I want to tell you that we have a strong community with people who are very, very involved in it, who are interested in their property rights. And I'm here on my own because I only found out about this a couple of days ago. There are 3 other directors. I am going to advise them of this whole this whole issue.
Sir,
yes.
May I address some of the very important things you brought up? May I?
Yes, you certainly.
First of all, if the town manages to buy this, it will be a public beach. And the access could be from the town landing on Burton Baker Beach.
There's no access.
Yes, there is access. There is public access.
There's a road.
Excuse me,
I've lived
sir.
here since 1980.
Yes.
I know what the road is like. Yes, you can go all the way around, but that area floods a lot and things
Yes,
like
it
that.
does.
The shellfishermen
Sir,
don't want to go into
no.
that area.
Sir, let me,
But I'm trying to explain to you what you said.
Yeah.
All right,
Skip,
please, one at a time,
I
and
can handle this. Sir,
thank you.
my first point is, and thank you for bringing up everything you brought up. And of course, when the town started looking into this, we were very concerned about ownership and proof of ownership. And we have requested and received documents that we didn't have, and we also had quite a few documents in the assessor's office, right? It's very clear that the property at the time that the subdivision was created at the top of the scarp that runs along this beach, that runs basically from Sewell's Gutter, from Burton Baker Beach, across Sewell's Gutter, all the way to the end of Field Point. It's clear that the intertidal area was severed from the upland property, which is why ownership was able to be established for the intertidal area. The quitclaim deed that shows the purchase makes it very clear. And there are different accesses. There's HDYLTA Road, which is now closed off. But what interested me was the idea of having a public beach, a very beautiful beach, that runs all the way from Burton Baker Beach Landing, actually from all the way from the Indian Neck Jetty, all the way to the end of Field Point. Your use as upland owners would of course not be restricted because we're talking about a public beach which you two can use. What's important here is that we've gotten the documentation. We're in the process of negotiating and confirming things with the owner's lawyers, the HDYLTA Trust owner's lawyers. But it all looks good as far as I'm concerned so far. And I'm mainly concerned that at no point anybody owns that property who can say to people who have agriculture grants out there, you have to pay us rent, and we get to set the rent. You have to pay us fees for access. Or somebody could buy it and just say you can't use it at all. Because in this town, if you want to have an agriculture farm and it's on private property, that private property owner has to give you permission, unlike what the town owns, right? So you brought up very good things, and of course we had heard about them when we started looking into this. I mean, I've been knowing about this as a possibility since 2011.
Let me just say,
I just finished.
you have
Let her-
a solid legal opinion that they have good title to what they claim they have title to.
Well, that's the question.
Yes. Yes.
You have a legal opinion that they have good title.
Sir, what I just said was, so far it looks like that, and we're confirming it. Obviously, you do not ask the town to spend money on something which they can't then.
So in other words, the answer is no.
The answer is
All right, we're going to
probably.
move on to the next question. All right, Mo,
If you
please.
agreed to
Excuse
this,
me.
and agree to millions of dollars when they don't even know whether they own the
Okay.
property or not, you're just throwing money.
Mr. Green-
Okay,
Mr.
fine.
Greenberg, we got your message. Okay. Thank you.
No, she would
No, you can stay.
Unprofessional.
Okay, we hear you and we thank you for your opinion, really, but we are going to move on. So it's not personal, and I thank you. And
It's not about
I understand. It's interesting.
No,
I said, this is. Let's not make it personal.
No,
This is
no,
fine.
okay.
Thank you, Mo.
A
We're moving
couple
on.
of things. I don't like being rushed into a financial situation. That's number one. I feel very uncomfortable with it. The other thing that comes to mind, we're trying to protect shellfishermen. And I think that paying this amount for waterfront land can create turmoil. In other words, who will be selling their property in lieu of these increased prices that we're not prepared for? We can create turmoil with this move. As much as the goal is to protect shellfishermen, and I'd love to hear an answer about this, because it just occurs to me that we could be doing more damage than good.
Thank you. Yes, there's a question. I'm sorry, or second.
Could we answer the question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so in other communities, okay, shellfishing the feds have decided that shellfishing is now a really big idea. And in other communities, a lot more money is being paid for access to or ownership of shellfishing acreage, okay? This is happening in a context that has to do with a lot of things coming together at this time, and the ball that's been rolling for quite some time about this has started rolling faster. And the fact that the HDYLTA trust owners are able to consider selling it to the town as opposed to selling it to an outside entity or to individuals that are already farming here so that the whole thing would be broken up is an opportunity that we should at least consider. And it went around a corner this year in a way, I don't want to take up a lot of time with the details of this, but that's the why it's happening so quickly.
Yes.
I want to say one other thing. We as a team up here we hear what you're saying, we hear what you're saying. It's fast for us too, and we're going to work really hard with, we're getting an appraiser or a surveyor, obviously a lawyer. We are working to put together a team of consultants with us that will help us make the decision. First of all, what is the title? How big is the property? All the questions that you all have, we have as well.
But you're
And we're going to spend time,
No,
and
2 weeks.
by town meeting, we should have some more information. You're right, it is fast. And we're going to look into it and try and do our best to bring you
All right.
more information, and then you can make a decision at town meeting.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to get to this woman over here that's been waiting for my question.
My name is Jody Birchall. I grew up on Powers Landing in Wellfleet since 1966. And there has been miles and miles and miles of change. We don't like change, but the shellfish industry has grown and is prosperous and is a wonderful thing for the town. When I was a young child, you could walk the flats with your oyster knife before dinner and open as many oysters as you wanted to. There was no policing, no shellfish grants whatsoever. My question is, I appreciate all the hard work that everybody's doing. I agree with what this man says. I agree with a lot of what everyone is saying. My question is, Provincetown, Wellfleet needs to own all the bottom. All the bottom. Provincetown years ago took all the bottom by eminent domain just to alleviate industry taking over the bottom. Eminent domain, if the town has the opportunity to prove that it's necessary, and I think some of those things are already in place, this is not the only place that is not owned by the town bottom. There's pockets all over. So if the town was to take from the East Ham property line, bring it all the way around, fair market value. Fair market value, I have swampland that I can't farm, that I'm assessed at $1,000 an acre. Let's just say that each acre is $5,000, so let's quadruple it and make it be $20,000 an acre. And you add up all those acres, it doesn't even come to what they're asking for this property. I think the town needs to own all the bottom. I think the town needs to, and I don't know if you've done this, that's why I'm here. Have you looked into the possibility of eminent domain of the town owning all the bottom?
Yes, this is one for the administrator.
So we are looking at that possibility. One of the first questions I asked is, are there other situations like this that will be coming up if we go forward with this purchase? The same question I asked. We're also looking at the possibility of eminent domain, knowing full well that you have to pay fair market value for we don't know how much that's going to be if we would look at everything. One question I would like to answer is, there is no way that we would purchase and write a check for any property unless we knew we had clear title on that piece of property. I'd also like to say in your warrant, you will see the property listed at $3.4 million. That is now $2.8 million. It's come down $600,000. We also have a donation of $1 million towards the purchase of this property. So if nothing else changes right now, the property, the cost to the taxpayer would be $1.8 million.
I just have one more adjunct question. If this is in fact property that has been bought and sold, and I know that Nancy Vale had somewhat recently assessed the value at $240,000, and we know assessments and fair market value aren't in line, but it's not like this line. So my other question was, if I can remember what I was going to say. Oh my God, I can't remember.
What was the assessment?
No, I just completely forgot it.
I want to know.
Okay, she knows, got it.
Real quick.
Have they paid property taxes?
Yes.
Yes.
Property taxes have been paid all along?
But,
2 years.
excuse me, but.
Okay, one question. Have they paid property taxes?
They started paying property taxes
When?
for the current assessment in 2015. However, and this is absolutely a fact, we don't know the exact number, because there have been two sales, right? At 20,000 an acre, and the other one was 80,000 for 4.5 acres.
Yeah.
According to Nancy Vale, their taxes are going to go up. Definitely. The assessors just haven't gotten to that.
My question was, have they been paying taxes?
I just answered that. 2015 they started.
And how much money on that?
No, okay, so one question at a time, please. And Bobby still has the floor here. Okay, so it's 20,000 an acre?
Yeah, and time,
Since 1994.
yeah,
So from 1994 to 2015, Bobby wants to say that they have not paid tax.
No, that's what it was assessed at.
Oh, that's what it was assessed at?
Yeah.
174 acres.
so this is divided by,
Right. Yeah, so you have it, so if you take 174 acres times 20,000 an acre, you come out with, it says 3,000, but it's more like 30.
I think you're going to 3.4 million, right?
No, it does not come out to 3.4 million.
Yeah.
20,
yeah,
it's 100, yes, but how many acres can be farmed?
Well, so that's a whole nother.
That's a whole
I
other.
have to answer that right here.
Okay,
So, before we,
All right, just-
I just want to
Who
add
paid
one
the
more
property
thing.
taxes before that?
Please. We're not going to debate all of those things and to get into an argument about these things. We're just trying to get facts out for everybody so you can make intelligent decisions as we're going forward and understand the picture.
So if everyone can remember what was said at the beginning, this has only come before us 3 weeks ago. We are looking into everything. As I said, we had, we only had one public meeting. We did not keep this from anybody or not involve anybody. We did have one public meeting. So all of these things are good. And we have, everyone has told us about their taxes, about the value. So just like, no anger, we know what's going on. I'll say it like that. How's that?
So, all right, so Dick first and then the gentleman in the back. Oh, I'm,
Let me answer quickly the question.
Okay.
So there are 75.38 acres under cultivation in HDYLTA right now. That includes the acreage that the owners have and the two.
Come on.
okay,
It includes the acreage that the owners have and the two purchases that have been made. Comes to 75.38 acres. If you multiply that conservatively by $20,000 per acre, it comes to $1,507,600. If you did it for the whole acreage, which according to the surveyor who did their planning board division of land plan, it's 254.5 acres. A lot of that can never be farmed because it's in the wild, harvest area. And when I looked at this in my practical way, no starry eyes about shellfishing, although I wanted to continue because it really is at the economic heart of the town at this point, I felt like, okay, 1 million, let's say 600,000, plus over a mile of public beach, that would be worth it to me. If we were just talking about the public beach, we could be seriously looking and thinking about, okay, maybe $1 million for that, in my opinion. How often do we get to buy a stretch of beach like that?
Okay, thank you. All right, Dick?
Couple of points. There are, assuming the town buys the land, there are some jetties on the land. Jetties are not very popular with the conservation powers that be. Would the town eventually tear those jetties down? What are they protecting? Who are they protecting? So that's a question that I think we should think about. Secondly, I assume that if the town buys the land, we will immediately take it by eminent domain from ourselves to clear the title. So there will be no question as to who owns it, right? Because once the town owns it, we're not going to sue ourselves over a fair price. So we would take it by eminent domain. So that means the title will be cleared because there's no party withstanding who can then say if the title isn't cleared. So now the next question is, what about all the land that's privately owned, that's not in the HDYLTA Trust and is not owned by the town? What does it do to their assessment? Are we going to apply the updated $3 million or $2.8 million divided by 70 acres, that price point, all the other shellfish grants in town? And that would cause quite a shock to the people who nominally own the highlands and all the way out to the intertidal flat.
Thank you, Dick. All right, yes, in the back.
Is there an
First of all,
answer?
I want to say,
Is there an answer to that? Do you have an answer? I'm sorry. Do you have an answer? Pardon me.
I have two answers. There are no jetties on this property. There are revetments that go along the bottom of the scarp that are owned. There are no jetties.
One jetty.
there's one day.
One jetty?
Yeah. Yeah, right at
And a Corps of Engineers.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Corps of
Okay, thank
Engineers
you.
wouldn't allow us to take it down.
Right, okay, and there are revetments along the bottom of the scarp that are owned by the upland owners. But I'm asking Ms. Chavetta, there are no other grants except for the town grants on the Zimmerman property that are on private property, or are there? You would know the answer to this.
It's complicated.
If you don't know, that's okay. You can get the information after.
Yeah, upland landowners, if they have had their bottom surveyed and they're paying taxes on it, it's not even like, upland landowners own in front of their properties until the mean low water mark
Yeah.
or 1,650 feet,
Yeah.
whichever is less.
Unless it's been severed.
Yes.
Yes.
You have to go through every single deed to find out if it's been severed and if they have actual title to it. So it's complicated. I don't think that what's happening on this waterfront property, on this intertidal bottom, is going to have any repercussions around town that the town is going to take. But we don't know what upland landowners might want to do. So,
Thank you. All right, gentleman standing in the back.
Hi, yeah, first of all, I want to say that I spoke with a couple of so-called wild oyster pickers, and they told me they were against this deal.
Mhm.
They said it's a lot of money to be paying for some mud flats. Secondly, I studied real estate in New Jersey. And down in New Jersey, they have very strict laws when it comes to mud flats and beaches and rivers and estuaries. And basically, all those areas are owned by the towns and the states. So I question that these people ever really own this, because really, the town owns the mud flats and all the beaches on Cape Cod.
Except for Massachusetts.
Thank you. No,
Did you hear the answer to that, for the shellfish?
Massachusetts.
Except for Massachusetts. It's-
So real estate, first of all, deals with real estate. Real estate means property that you can build on and the building's on it. You cannot build on mud flats.
However, they have huge production value.
This is the only thing that makes them valuable. So in other words, I agree, the oyster fishermen own all those oysters, but the town of Wellfleet and the state of Massachusetts owns the mud flats.
No, they
Check
do
your real
not
estate.
in this
well,
case.
that's, okay, so there's a difference
out
of
the meaning
opinion
of
that
real
we'll live with for now. Thank you. And, so I'm gonna go with, wait. All right. Yeah.
There is an answer.
All right, if there is this,
In the state, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, everywhere else in the country, upland owners own to the high water, mean high water. In Massachusetts, the colonial ordinances of 1641 through 47 said that upland owners own to the mean low water mark or 1,650 feet, whichever is less. So they do. It's different from every other state because we're special.
wasn't that changed, I'm gonna ask you a question, wasn't that law changed in 1924, which led to this situation? There was another case that changed the colonial.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, all right, then I'm going to consider myself wrong and we're going to move on.
That case, if there is a clear record of it being severed, that's when the flats, the intertidal area that Nancy just described, is considered separate. Okay, that's what changed.
Thank you, yes. Yes, and then I'm going to go to you against the wall. Okay.
Hi,
Mike.
I'm Paul Faxon. So I have some questions here, and they all go to the concept of whether we're really acting in a good government fashion and transparency and providing full deliberation. The first one has to do with the valuation of this property. This property is, under valuation methods, really can only be valued in one way, and that's the income capitalization methodology. So you're going to look at what the fair market value is of income that would be paid by shell fishermen, and then you multiply that by what the investment multiplier would be for that. So that type of analysis needs to be done here. The other thing is the concept of highest and best use. Let's be very clear here. It's a very rare scenario where these flats will not be shellfished, whoever owns them. There's nothing else you can do with them, with the rare exception of someone who just wants to leave them completely as is. So what we're not talking about losing the shellfishing here. We're talking about who owns it and how much is going to be paid for the privilege of shellfishing. So I want that concept to be considered, because sometimes as I hear this conversation, it's as if the town doesn't buy it, done, there will be no shellfishing there. That's just not realistic under 95% of the scenarios. The next question I have is, if we spend $3 million, $2.5 million, whatever the figure is, we need to be intentional about that we're now taking $2.5 million that we could use for subsidized housing for moderate income people and the like. It's a real trade-off. And so I have a real question about that. In terms of other properties that the town's bought before, most of those properties are properties that everyone is enjoying. I can't enjoy a grant there that I don't have a license. I can enjoy the library. My children could go to the school. I can go play baseball at the field. So we're basically taking a select group of people who would be lucky enough to have those grants, none of the other shell fishermen necessarily who are on private grants in Wellfleet, and we're saying you're going to have a special situation if it turns out that we're not charging what the market would be. So that's another question that I want us to really look at and consider. And lastly, as someone who's been practicing real estate law in Massachusetts for almost 40 years, if we go to the eminent domain route, I hope that in the budget we've budgeted for legal fees. Because if we do have deep pockets on the other side, that's going to be a factor. So none of these are my way of saying, I don't think the town should do it. And I want to support the shell fishermen. But it's my way of saying, I really see a lot of questions here, and I'm disturbed by the speed that this is happening. I feel if this was a real estate developer, a client of mine, I'd say, why are you bidding against yourself? Who else are you bidding against? So those are some of the questions I think that need to be answered, and if we can answer them satisfactorily, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody want to make a comment there?
I'd like to,
Okay, all right, Michael.
just to the idea that, like, if this property is not owned by the right people, that it will inherently be shellfished. There's people that possibly do not want shellfishing on there. And that's a third of the town's aquaculture acreage in this area. So it's just as likely that someone buys that for shellfishing or someone buys that to clear the beach, you know? I don't know what the intentions are of upland owners. I am concerned about a triggering effect where people go, my upland is worth this, my lowland is worth this much, why don't I subdivide it too? But there is a risk that we could lose those aquaculture sites because the permission to operate on those sites has to be granted from the landowner in order for the town to sign off on them. And that wasn't always the case, and there is potential for adverse possession lawsuits for aquaculture license holders who have been there since the 80s. All that stuff is super complicated. The situation is a giant can of worms, if you ask me. And I think personally that the town should own its bottom. It has been in public use for hundreds of years. It has been the economic hub of this town for hundreds of years. There have not been property taxes paid on any of this property for 400 years since the colonial ordinance was adopted. And so I don't know the means to get there, but to me it seems like the town should have control over 40% of its economy, which is basically shellfishing. 30 to 40%, I don't know the exact number, but it's a large number of its economy, a large percentage of its economy, and it's just, down the road, like I'm just full disclosure, I have a grant in that trust area. Even if I were to buy it personally, who's to say I wouldn't sell it to the highest bidder in the future? And then down the line, everyone. And, you know, when it comes to retirement, people might say, hey, the guy on the hill, he's going to pay me $400 grand just to not have an aquaculture site out here. You know? Am I going to say no? I mean, I don't know at that point, you know? But right now, I think that area should belong to the town, be part of the town forever. And not just that area, but all of the tidal flats that have been used historically by the town as part of its cultural heritage, really. I mean, nothing in this town has defined it so much as its shellfish industry. I mean, tourism is new. In the 70s, you could buy a piece of property for like 12 grand, you know? And I live right now in a 500 square foot studio apartment that I rent, and honestly, if I wanted to leave or if I got kicked out, I don't even know where I would move because there's no inventory. So all that stuff has changed, but shellfishing has remained a constant economic hub for people who live here, and I hope to stay something that way forever.
Okay, does anybody? Jan? And I think that wasn't a question. All right, so Jan, you have a question.
I'm Jan Morrissey. Two things. I think this property should be in public hands, not private, but as some of you know, I've been concerned all along with the cost and also the speed at which we're being asked to make this decision. So I would remind select people up here that you have the ability to call a special town meeting at any time. And I asked our assistant town administrator what that cost might be, and he said about $3,000. So it isn't that we have to do it right now. We could wait a couple months to make a decision when we had more information. And the other comment I want to make is that I think we should be a little careful how we sell this as a public beach, because it's a public beach, but there's no parking. It's not like hundreds of people or even scores of people can use it. The only place to park that's public is Burton Baker Beach, and you can put maybe 6 cars there. If you park on both sides, which is a bad idea because I've been hit there before, to park on both sides. So let's make sure the public understands that it's not like there's a lot of parking for the public.
Okay, I'm going to go to Danny and then right then.
I just want to say a couple of things in terms of the process that takes place when an article like this comes before the town, because as moderator of the town meeting, I think it's important for everybody to understand exactly what you're being asked to do. Town meeting doesn't buy property. Town meeting authorizes the Board of Selectmen to buy property. If we vote in favor of this article, we're not committing the town to spend $3.4 million or $2.8 million or $1.8 million. We're not committing the town to do anything. If this article is successful and passes, what the town meeting is doing, what the legislative body is doing, is authorizing the Board of Selectmen to carry out a negotiating process with the owners of the property, which if they don't like the terms, if they don't get clear title, if they don't come to some sort of an agreement, they don't have to act on it. Town meeting cannot require the Board of Selectmen to take any action. And by the same token, the Board of Selectmen, the administrative branch, the executive branch, cannot take an action without authorization from the town meeting. So what town meeting is not being asked, town meeting isn't being asked to spend a specific amount of money. Town meeting isn't being asked necessarily to commit to buying this property. What town meeting is being asked is, are we willing to give the Board of Selectmen authorization to negotiate on behalf of the town and in the best interest of the town if they think that it makes sense for the town to purchase this property. So just so you're clear, I mean, there's a lot of noise being made now is do we have all the answers? Maybe yes, maybe no. Can we have all the answers in place by the time we come to town meeting? Perhaps yes, perhaps no. But again, remember that we are not committing to buy this property by a yes vote at town meeting. We're authorizing the Board of Selectmen to negotiate in the best interest of the town.
Just a quick point. That's a difficult position to negotiate from once the funds have been allocated, or you've made an announcement about what you're willing to pay. So that's I understand Danny's point.
Right.
It's well taken, but there is that.
Right. There is an amount put into that question, and that question is giving up to that amount, and that's the question at hand here. Yes.
No, they won't negotiate.
David.
I think that I agree with those. What?
Say who you are.
Yes.
David Meatfox, sorry. I agree with those who have said that this is fast. I believe it is too fast. I would be willing to bet if it could be done in a responsible, careful way, that a whole lot of people, myself included, would love to have the town own the bottom. I think that the goal supporting shell fishermen is there. I worry that we're going to bid up the value of the land, which will hurt other shell fishermen later. I worry that that all these questions ought to be answered. And I like the idea, actually, of a special town meeting. It could be called relatively quickly. And then lastly, the pricing ourselves up is a real issue. And I want to ask one other thing about the town warrant, maybe a selectman or board, that this doesn't actually say up to 3.4 million. Okay. What the words say, to see if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of 3.4 million or any other sum. It doesn't say up to that. So
it says
maybe
you
there's
go over.
well, if I read the words,
You can go over that amount.
Right.
If I can try to answer for you, David, for everybody else. Virtually every money article that appears in the warrant always uses that phrasing, or any other sum.
Yeah, I saw
When we come to town meeting, we're not voting on the wording of the article, we're voting on a motion that's made under that article. And the motion will specify a specific amount of money, whether it's 1.8 or 2.4 or some other figure. The motion that's made under that warrant article will specify a sum. And in general, the rule of thumb that most moderators use is that's a cap. That's a ceiling, it's not a floor. So that a lower amount can be moved. Now, the reality is different towns have different traditions. There is some leeway to go a little bit over. In other words, if let's say we're proposing to buy a new bulldozer, and the warrant article says to spend $60,000 on a new bulldozer, and by the time we get to town meeting, we find out that the bulldozer is going to cost $65,000. That's usually considered reasonable and within the scope of the article. If suddenly the bulldozer costs us $120, I would probably make a ruling that it was out of order. So any other sum is a wording that allows a motion to be made that differs from the wording in the article, but in general it will not be higher.
Okay, so would there a motion be made at town meeting with a specific amount?
Yes.
Okay.
We don't know what that is now. It's being worked on.
May I speak to that briefly?
Yes.
So, this has been a moving target. I want to address two things that David Mead Fox said. To all of you, you're getting a lot of information about this quite quickly. And the people who have been aware of this building over a number of years, and suddenly push came to shove. It has come to a head, and for reasons outside this town, some of which I've referred to. There is a lot to know about it, but starting with the document that's accessible to everybody, it's also going to be on the town website as well as the forum website. Take a look at it, and you will get very quickly up to speed about it. And it is time sensitive in the same way that the dredging article is time sensitive. And yes, I'm hoping that, and our select board hasn't discussed this yet, that given that there is a very solid, sure thing, that 1,800,000, which is a whole lot less than what's in the warrant, could possibly just be the motion. We wouldn't even have to amend the article, but our select board hasn't met on that yet, and we don't even know if it will be that price. It might be lower by the time we get to town meeting. This deserves, in my opinion, and I've done a lot of work on it, and I have a lot of other things to do, a lot of focus right now. It's time sensitive, things are changing around us, and it's really worth reaching for if we can all get our feet under us and take a good look at it.
Okay, there's a question in the back,
Yeah,
and then I'll go to the next one.
I just wanted us to look ahead a little bit, into the future. My father, Robert Morse, he started on the board that created the, in the 1960, I believe, the National Seashore. And they fought tooth and nail to get the National Seashore so that we could all enjoy it. Now, if we could think forward a little bit and forget about the $65 coming out of our checkbook and think about the future of Wellfleet and the future of shellfishermen, I think that we might get to a better place. It's a can of worms. If some corporation comes in there and starts growing millions and millions of oysters, it's going to affect every single shellfisherman in this town when they start getting 20, 15 cents, 10 cents for an oyster. Because that can happen. So I just think we should think beyond ourselves into the future.
Okay, thank you. There was another question. Did you have a yes?
My name is Katie Cushman. I have a question. I understand that we're trying to do this on the fast track, but did they put the land up for sale and that's why we're reacting this way?
That goes back to my original question that did not get answered. How did this property come about? How did you become aware of it? Is it on an a listing?
No.
Is it up for sale? Who approached who? How did that all happen?
I can answer that. So, in 2011, 2012, the HDYLTA Trust, members of the HDYLTA Trust, the 4 people who were beneficiaries of the trust, took a portion of this large property of 254.5 acres to the planning board and asked it to be divided. And it went through the planning board, and it was a plan of land that included not only the boundaries of the grants that were already on there, but a number of other lots, which is what they're called after they go through the planning board. I was on the planning board, Janet Reinhardt was on the planning board. And the reason they did that is that way you can sell them. And they have sold some since then, maybe, these 7.5 acres to 2 different people. But in other words, it was in the wind for them. They spent a lot of money, they've gone through a lot of litigation, a lot of money for people back then. It doesn't seem like a lot of money now, but for people that are working that aren't millionaires, even if they're bringing in pretty good money as, aquaculturists, it was a lot of money, and it dragged them to courts, and they won. And then they let people farm out there who were already there, and they didn't charge them rent. Maybe there was some money received for initial permission to use the land, in some cases. But basically, they were landlords who didn't charge rent. That's huge. And people started being able to make a living out there. And at the same time, people get older, and these 4 people who are beneficiaries that hold their, trust.
Can we get the question?
Okay, sorry. The question was, how did this happen now? It all came to a head. There was
Yes, we can get right to, how did this property in the last 3 weeks come to you?
Well, it's actually more like a month. Somebody from the shellfishing community came to me. I used to be on the shellfishing committee. I am going to try to be brief. I can do it. I can do it. Right. And she said, oh my God, there are these sales in another municipality for acreage, just permission to use it for a whole lot of money, like a whole lot of money. And the people in the HDYLTA Trust are really sick. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but sick of doing this for all these years. They're ready to have it be different, right? They've been landlords. And people are they're considering, because of the whole thing that's going on outside of this in the state about privatizing shellfish aquaculture licenses and also ownership of bottom, which are 2 separate issues. Things are changing out there, and they're worrisome. And they're counter to home rule.
Okay.
And what happened was, that person and I went to the town administrator.
You got to answer their question.
Did they go to you, or did you go to them?
Oh, no. They did not go to the town, and the town did not go to them. What happened was, after that conversation, I was asked by somebody, the trustee of the HDYLTA Trust, to have exchanges about information. There was no bargaining, there was no negotiating, it was just, are you interested? And they said they were interested. And then there was more exchange of information, and now we're at the place where
Okay, so
that's how
I'm going to ask a question if I may.
The answer, Sheila, could you summarize the answer?
I believe so the answer is, who came to who? You went to them with, who came up with the number?
Yeah.
Oh, the number they came up with, and there was no bargaining. Right now, we're bargaining about it. It's different. But during the initial exchange, the number was simply supplied by them.
All right. I have one question. Did anyone ever speak to, these gentlemen live here. They were able to purchase this land for $25,000 back in the day, and yes, it was a lot, but between 4 people, it gets to be more palatable. They've sold some lots off, so they've made back their 25 and then some, and have been very good neighbors and not charging rent nor paying taxes, so it's all a wash, I guess. Not for the town, but for everybody else. So, to me, did anyone say to them, there are ways you can give this land to the town for a very reduced rate, and you get a very big capital gains tax, you get another real estate tax, which is very beneficial, that doesn't have to come out of, and yet you're doing really a gift to the town. I mean, they could come up and look at, I mean, you say there's 173 acres, but there really is only, or lots, but there's only so many that can really be farmed. The others are wild anyway. So with that limited amount, what is there, 18 lots that can be sold, or?
No,
But all right, so, well, regardless, you could just, they could come up. So did anybody have that discussion? And my last question is, in your answers, it says the current assessed value of this land is $295,600.
Yes,
So I'm not sure how the number.
Okay, to answer the first question.
Right.
What you asked us now is what's going on right now.
Right.
Okay, second answer. That's the current assessed value, but as I said earlier, because of these sales, the assessor's about to raise the taxes. That is the assessment prior to these sales.
Okay, so there were two sales. Now, my other question was, did anyone have any conversation about a land gift?
That is what's happening now. That's the kind of exchange that goes on during negotiations and so forth. In my conversations with the trustee, some of these things were brought up, but at no point was I acting or was he acting as someone who was bargaining or negotiating. Right now, we're in the negotiating bargaining stage, okay? Which is very different.
Okay, open it up. Mary.
Yeah, I'd like to know who's discussing this on behalf of the town of Wellfleet.
Yes.
Because I am not convinced that this is the group that should be doing that.
That's what I was thinking.
Level.
If I can respond to that question. So there have been no negotiations that have gone on to date. This has been a collection of information.
Well, that's not what you're.
If I can respond to your question,
We
please.
just started.
There have been no negotiations that have gone on to date. Selectman Wilson has been in contact with the trustees and basically said, what would it take for the town to buy this property? The town hasn't negotiated on, as a town, to date. Last night, we had an executive session meeting of the select board to determine where we go forward from here. The first thing that we're doing is we're hiring an appraisal of the property to get an appraisal of its value. The second part will then be to take that back to the selectmen and say, what do you think is a worthwhile price on this property? So there has been no negotiation at this time. It's only been a collection of information on behalf of Selectman Wilson, and she made it very clear when she did that she was acting as an individual and not representing the
Well,
selectmen.
but she just described it as negotiation, that's
Yeah,
why my question.
yeah.
We are just starting that process now. She has not had the authority to do the negotiation in the past.
And
So.
if things move forward, who will be discussing with the people who own the trust? Who will be discussing the terms of any kind of
So you
purchase?
You
And
can
who
count
will
on
be
an attorney being involved every step of the way.
Yeah.
Representing the Board of Selectmen at this point would be myself, Selectman Wilson, and the Shellfish Constable, Nancy Shabetta. We also don't have any authority to make any decision on our own. We're just collecting information, negotiating with the owners of what we think the fair price might be, and then bringing that back to the select board. The select board ultimately would make the decision.
Okay, and who is thinking about some of these other ideas that sound plausible? Like eminent domain, or whatever
We have-
somebody else said over here.
A week ago, Monday, I had a brief conversation with the attorney for the trust regarding eminent domain. So we're looking at exactly all those pieces of information. Again, I'm not a real estate attorney, so we're going to have a real estate attorney representing us every step of the way to make sure that if we do buy this land, that we have a clear title to this property and that it is in the best interest of the town when we do purchase it.
And that all possible approaches, I take.
Yes,
Not
I'm
just
looking at things such as, could we buy some of this land with community preservation funds for open space? The state has a grant program for open space property. Could we buy some of this land with an open space grant from the state? So I'm exploring every possibility out there. I would like to just make one comment about what's been said earlier is the moderator obviously knows what he's talking about. I will write up a motion that somebody will make at town meeting, and it will be worded something to the effect, based on what we have right now, that the town is authorized to purchase, the select board are authorized to purchase this property for $2.8 million to be reduced by the $1 million donation. Town meeting voters have the right to say no, we don't want to purchase this. They have the right to say we want to indefinitely postpone this, we want you to come back with more information. And when you've got more information, call a special town meeting and bring it forward to us then. You have the right to decide anything. You can say you only think the value of the property is $1 million or $500,000. The adjustment, the amendment could be made on town meeting floor to change the dollar amount in the motion.
And
So,
could an amendment be made on town meeting floor to carry on the search for information and alternatives and have an additional town meeting?
you know what, we would hear that during, what you would basically do is if you're not comfortable yet to make a decision, you would make a motion to indefinitely postpone that article. And in the conversation, we would hear, you want more information, we don't think we're ready to make that decision. We would continue to work on the information, and as soon as we feel we have it, then we'd ask the select board to call a special town meeting.
Great. Okay, so I wanted to give Jerry, and then I'll come to you. I'm trying to get people who have not asked a question yet. So Jerry, and then two people over here, and then I'm going to come back to you, Mark.
To answer some of that previous question directly, I'm not speaking for HDYLTA Trust. This property's been on the market for sale for over 7 years. This isn't sudden. During those 7 years, I have to be extremely careful because I've got an awful lot of friends that I'm looking at across in this room. This is not an easy subject for anyone in the town of Wellfleet to try and discuss in a forum in the open space like this. HDYLTA Trust was successful in not only spending $25,000 to get a deed, but they spent a tremendous amount of money in legal fees, time, and energy. Everybody, or most everybody that was out there at the time when this happened, and they were going to lose their grants because of the upland owners, some, maybe one, wanted to kick them out, got together, literally almost at the last resort, found the loophole where they could buy the people that own this property. The lowland. It was separated from Cape Lands when they bought it. They didn't bother buying the lowland. They kept the upland, sold the upland. As soon as they bought it, it took them years to decide what they were going to do. But they have been trying over the past 7 years or more to sell the grants that they have established to the grant holders that are on the property. The 18, 20 people that have been working their backsides out there for 20 years and giving it blood, sweat, and tears. When it's cold, it's colder out there, and when it's hot, it's hotter out there, and they work hard for their money. But they were the owners of the property. They tried to get those individuals who had the grants to buy the grants. A few people in town of Wellfleet who have bought, a young individual came to me and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Listen, if you can own property, nobody can take it away from you. If you farm it and you put your labor in, you own it, and you can then turn around and resell it. My advice is if you've got the opportunity and you've got the ability, buy it." the trust has been unsuccessful in getting the majority, most everybody who's got a grant out there, the ability to sell the property, because they don't want to spend the money.
Okay.
So consequently, this hasn't happened overnight. HDYLTA Trust has had a number of people that were looking at the whole thing. So it's been there. Something else may have come in, the state may be doing something, but HDYLTA Trust has spent a lot of money up front. When you go and you talk about value at $20,000 an acre, what Nancy has not done, because she doesn't have the records, you've got some grant holders out there that are got an acre of land or 2 acres of land that are farming it on the minimal side, maybe making $1,000 a year. You've got other farmers out there that are kicking ass, and they're probably making $250,000 or more. So what happens is, when you come in and you try and take by eminent domain, or you get into a, better words, a pissing contest between a buyer and a seller, and you end up in court, the court is going to settle for the highest and best value. And they're not going to just check the appraised value. They're going to say, wait a minute, what can a 2-acre grant, if somebody is maximizing that grant, what can they bring in? And that's the potential expense the town of Wellfleet would be liable for if you end up in court. So if you end up buying it, buy.
No.
Let him finish, please.
I've been involved enough with the National Seashore. That's the way it works when you go to court, if you don't settle it prior to. So what I'm recommending is, if in fact you choose to do it, so be it, and you buy it, try not to go to eminent domain, try and buy it outright, because in the long run, it will be a lot cheaper for all of us in the town of Wellfleet who's got to pay the bill.
Just a minute, there was somebody else that, yes.
I just had a quick question about the $1 million anonymous donor. How solid is that?
And is it a donation and not somehow tied
Who
to
is that
the
person?
ownership?
Who is that missing person? That's a good donation. Well, I think we should know who that person is. Well, yeah, most people.
I personally know this person, and I personally know this person and can assure you that this is a firm donation. If we were to approve this at town meeting, I would talk to this person and request that they put the money in an escrow account to show that their commitment as we're negotiating with it. But it is a firm commitment. The person who has made this commitment has requested to remain anonymous.
Yeah, my question is,
Next.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, no, I'll come to Michael after.
So right now, I know we're talking about the HDYLTA Trust, but is there going to be, are we going to set up a plan to own the whole bottom? Or is this going to be an ongoing process every time we want to get more of the bottom? Because now this is just one parcel. Am I saying this right?
Yeah.
What bottom are you referring to, Betty?
To the whole town. To the whole town. Other parts that we don't own, that the town doesn't own. Am I wrong?
I guess it would be, it's an unknown.
It's an unknown. How we would acquire, like Provincetown acquired all of their bottom. So I guess that's my question. How would we?
Something worth looking into. The state, when I asked initially, said it would take an act of legislation, but I'm not going to stop there and keep researching.
Okay, quickly.
To answer your question, hello, that's to the lady at the back of the room. The thing about this 254.5 acre property is how contiguous it is. The other privately owned, areas that people are maybe shellfishing on or maybe not, depending how far out they are. It's all kind of chopped up.
Right.
This is a huge area, and I'm going to say this again, it's no black mayonnaise.
Thank you. All right, Michael.
I just have one point to make about what Jerry had said about the valuation. The reason why it can't be valued the same way as like agriculturally productive land is because the land is separated from the lease in which someone operates on that property. So the land is only worth what the lease holder is allowed to grow on there. Without the lease, that land is not valued. It is not. You can get rid of the lease, then what is the land value? It's not leased. The lease is up to the state and the town to determine who can operate that license. And without that license on there, then that land loses the value of the productivity of that land. So there's a separation that doesn't exist on land, that does exist out at the sea, where an aquaculture license is separate from the bottom. And if you own the bottom and the license, then there's value, okay? But if you own the land, but you don't own the license, that land does not have that value. And also, if land is under wild production and cannot be farmed because it's productive land, it also does not have that productive value because that's open to the public. So it's very different than agricultural land productiveness. It is not the same thing, and it cannot be used. But it could. I mean, you could make the argument in the court of law, but I think the fact that the license allows the production, it's separate from the bottom, would eliminate that as a model for the courts to use to determine the value of that land. Personally, I'm fairly certain on that, and I've talked to a few lawyers, and I'm pretty sure. Okay, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to say.
Sheila, can I add something?
But when you take that license off the land, that land loses its productive value.
Respectfully, to add to what Mr. DeVasto says, and I'm looking forward to serving with Mr. DeVasto on the select board.
Yes, it's me, a future selectman.
If you own,
In case you don't make it a free
yes,
town meeting.
if you own, excuse me. However, if you are a landlord, perhaps an absentee landlord, and you own that bottom, and you have a person who's been farming on there and supporting themselves and contributing to our economy, you can charge that person rent. And you have them over a barrel.
Sure.
And that property then, with the charging of the rent, then becomes, that's a way to assess the value.
But
You
if the
see?
person-
And that's to be avoided.
But
If the town owns it and is not charging the license holder rent, that's a whole other matter, and you're right about that.
Okay, so if I can clarify Michael's point. I own the land. Michael wants to farm that land, so I'm gonna say, sure, you can farm it, and I'm gonna charge you rent for that acre. And then he goes to you, and you say, we're not gonna give a license to that land. So there's no work. So in the end, you get to say to anybody who can work there if that can be shelled or not. So if some big corporation comes in and says, we're gonna buy this land because we're gonna shellfish this and make a big thing, and you say, no, then we're not giving licenses for that partial of land, then there's nothing there.
That
Right?
land
Nothing can
value
happen.
drops to nothing.
Goes down to zero, because then you hold the key to the farming of that land.
But we cannot, the select board who makes the decision about giving licenses cannot capriciously refuse to give somebody a license. We have criteria.
No.
And the point is,
We're not gonna mess with what,
The 3 years in the injury-free, this is salvaging 3 years. This body of you and you and you and you and you and you and you.
You're all getting identified.
Yeah. Salvage, you have to be 3 years in the injury for salvaging.
and a resident. You have to be a resident.
Right, a resident, right?
Yeah.
And you have to have 3 years
Yeah.
experience.
This is, yeah.
To get put on the lease, you need to have, we just updated our regulations in January. You have to have 3 out of the last 4 years. You have to have a commercial wild harvesting permit and be documented by the Shellfish Department using it. And you have to have, I think it's about the same number of years, 3 years, experience working on a grant and been documented working locally. You have to be a domiciled resident. You can't just be a property owner to get your name on a lease.
And you need to have permission from whoever owns the bottom. And you have to have permission for access. And if the town owns the bottom, and if the town has, control of the access, you get it. You get your license. But that last part is, you could be completely qualified, and if you don't have permission from the landowner, you can't do it.
Okay.
So the other side, the used,
Conservation.
no, yeah, no.
The organization.
Yeah, but what he's saying is grant that was given to them, land. You're speaking of the land that was given to them?
But I own, and Ronnie owns, and Mike Piken owns, and,
It's okay.
yeah, Ralph owns this property, but they, no.
I don't think you own the bottom there. That's off of Audubon.
No, this is,
You own you have a lease.
yeah,
You have a lease.
No.
Sorry.
So, trust me on this. So, this is 70-50 is the old on side. So,
1650.
yeah, this is,
Okay. I'm with you, Bobby. We're gonna get it in a minute, but we're gonna follow up on the Audubon Society. All right, I'm gonna go with Dick, Paul, in here, and then we're gonna have to wrap it up, so we're gonna be getting late. And then I'll go to the back, so it'll be 4 more questions.
Funding of this property and paying it back, why hasn't the town considered charging some economic rent that reflects the value? Why is it just giving away, buying the land and just giving it away, as opposed to saying, if we spend $1.8 million, some fraction of that should be recovered in rent over the period of the 20 years that we're paying off the bond?
For the rent as opposed to like their $25 license.
For rent.
Can I address that? This comes up, by the way, I really hope you all read the document, because this comes up a little bit. In my opinion, as one person, growing up here in the 50s, surrounded by kids my age who lived in poverty, I want to do everything possible for us to support our single largest industry, okay? And I think we should raise the fees a bit. I do not think we should start charging rent. I think we should take into account the people that farm here have to pay for equipment, seed, they have to prove up. They are part of the economic engine in this town, and I do not want to exclude use of the resource to people who have more money. They have to be good actors, good farmers, they have to comply with our regs. I want the whole resource used by the people in the boats, by the wild harvesters, by the people who have a quarter of an acre, and by the people who have bigger businesses. It's over between a tenth and a 15% of the town's population is directly affected financially by shellfishing. And given that they have to spend so much money and they have to deal with the weather and there are all kinds of wild cards, I do not think we should charge anybody rent, not on ink. I want to,
Okay, so that was just, all right, so that's, all right, so here's a question here, and then there's gonna be another.
I'd like to hear Mr. Baker, he's been skipped over.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Over again, he's a good man and he lives out
Who is-
there. And I'd like to hear his question.
Oh, Paul, I'm sorry, I knew there was somebody else, it is Paul, you're right, and I wanted to hear from Paul, I apologize.
sorry, Mr.
I didn't
Banner.
see your hand before, Paul.
I'm one of the owners of the, in the association, and I had my house there about, 30 or more years ago. And what we learned when I was president of the association, every deed for every property along there had different things in it. And my deed gives me certain rights down there. Now, maybe Frazier, when he pulled Frazier and Levin, when they did all this, screwed them all up. That's possible. But I'd like to point out, all this period, the Shellfish Warden, the Conservation Trust, and our association have maintained that whole place there, and we controlled it. And furthermore, I'd like to point out, both roads leading to that property are private roads. And when you're dealing with, if the town owns it, which we all wanted, we always assumed that the town owned it. If you take over that land, I wish you would straighten out the access to the land. Since there are only 2 roads, it's been very expensive to maintain them, but we have done that. And incidentally, the shell fishermen at various times have offered to chip in to maintain the roads because they go across. However, we've never accepted it, and we, as owners of that area, have maintained it all these years. But parking is a problem down there. It always has been, and those issues should be hopefully taken care of when you say who owns that land and who uses it.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Thank you. Banner. That's what I thought she's the baker. But I know Paul. Yes.
So just a couple of things. One, when you think about what the value is of this property, think about it as raw land. If I have raw land, it has no worth unless I get someone to rent on it, unless I build a property. But if I can't build on it, and someone says, I'm going to rent this for a storage yard or whatever, you look at that rent, and you multiply it by what the normal multiplier would be, and that's how you come up with the value. That's the accepted appraisal standard. So of course, if I have raw land, its value is determined, if I can't build on it, by what someone's going to pay. Okay, that's number one. Number two, when you look at the price that was paid for individual lots, you got to be very careful about multiplying that out. I'll give you 2 hypotheticals. Let's say there's 175 acres of land in Wellfleet for purchase. And the landowner says, I'm going to sell it in 2-acre parcels. Or I'm going to sell it to someone 175 acres. Which do you think is going to have the lowest price per square acre? Of course, there'll be a dramatic decrease because of the economies of scale. The third one is, and this is the part I'm struggling with, and I'm just trying to be open about that, is this acquisition of the town would have benefits to the public, clearly to the town, and to our culture. It would also, though, benefit a very small select group of people, literally 20 to 25 people, who would farm that, and maybe some indirect beneficiaries out of that. And so there's a tension there. So let me give you a hypothetical. I'm a lawyer, so I like hypotheticals. Here's the hypothetical. People say, Wellfleet's known for a number of things, and one of the things it's known is for its arts community. Let's say someone has a building in downtown Wellfleet, and it houses 20 artist lofts with working artists who sell their work. And it's owned by Mrs. Smith, and Mrs. Smith has owned it for 30 years, and because she loves the art and loves Wellfleet, she doesn't charge the tenants a dime. So for 30 years, those artists use that space, sell their wares in that space for 30 years. Mrs. Smith dies. Her only son is dying in California, needs care. They need to start charging rent. The artists say, this isn't fair. We want the town to buy that property from us, have the taxpayers pay, and then we want the town to pay us to charge us 0 rent. It's a similar situation. It's a town resource and the like. And so that's a similar situation. So my point is, look, it's not identical, but I'm using that hypothetical just to say that as a town, And we may decide intentionally it's worth it. The industry is so important, and we want to support our shell fishermen who are struggling to survive, that we're willing to subsidize that by buying it and charging them nothing or next to nothing. But I want us to realize that it's a mixed public and private benefits. All of us will benefit, but unlike a lot of public purchases, like for a library, a school, or a field, or a wastewater treatment plant, or whatever, it's not going to benefit, it's benefiting a small group disproportionately to the rest of the town. And that's a challenge. That's something we need to think about.
Thank you. All right, there's one more question in the back, and then I'll come back to you, Michael. Or I'll go to Mo and then Michael, and then we'll wrap it up. Yes?
Well, I think the principle, agreed what you're saying. I disagree with what you're saying because, for example, I don't have children, but I want to live in a place where the children are educated. So I'm happy to pay for schools. So there are a lot of things like that. But I think what I would like to see tidied up before we take the question to town meeting has to do with something that's been asked more than once here. The answer has been the document is very clear. I'm sorry, I'm not finding the document that clear on the question of if we are interested in making this publicly owned so that a realistic risk, for example, could be that the whole industry, I'm not really worried about the Chinese or anything like that. I'm worried that the whole nature of the industry could change because part of what it will cost to do work as a shellfisherman will now include owning and paying for real estate, which is really hard on Main Street. And we've seen what happens on our Main Street where things are so expensive that people can't come along and start interesting businesses here. You have to be a millionaire. Real estate wasn't like that long ago. And so I think there's a real risk and a real interest that we all share in keeping the industry an artisanal industry, that people pay a good price for these oysters, partly because of that. We do not have a Duxbury situation here. Read about the farming in Duxbury. There's someone who owns a lot of that property, and the people who do shellfishing now are wage workers, not business owners. So the benefit we get from these people being business owners is really big. It's bigger than what you're seeing. Because there's such a huge difference between being a business owner and being a wage worker if you want to live out here, anywhere out here. And so I think it's super interesting. I really want this to happen. I can't understand the document when it comes down to what will remain for us to attempt to purchase if we want the bottom. So let's say that we look into eminent domain and that looks too scary and we don't do it. We want to buy it piecemeal. I need to understand better than what this document is doing for me, what the pieces are. Because what I'm seeing is that about half, is this right? About half of Wellfleet's grants are on public property already, and the other half are on private property. And that we're looking at buying 1/3, 30% of the grants, but I understand the word grant to be separate from land, right? So I don't really see can you please clarify how much of all that there is that's currently private are we being asked to buy now so that we can know how much that's currently private would remain for us to try to buy, even though we know that you won't really be able to tell what that will cost because there's no way that we're going to research every single title, every single privately owned piece there. But I still want to know how much is left.
All right, so what we did was answer the questions that John Morrissey gave to us.
Yeah.
So anything, so just so there's plenty of questions that still have to be asked that weren't in that document. We were just trying to be forward-thinking with that. So if this was me in the office with a map, my best guess at private and public land on which grants were situated. So I believe that so there's 50% about that is on private land. And Indian Neck is part of that 50%. I did not look at what the percentage is of the privately held land that is represented by the HDYLTA Trust, but I can do that. I just haven't done that calculation yet. It's a good question. So how much does HDYLTA Trust represent of the potential? Yeah. Okay, that's a great question.
Okay, so I'm going to let Mo have a quick question. We're getting on to 9 o'clock, and I'm sure people, I know it's fascinating. We can be here all night, but
I was thinking with Jody's suggestion about eminent domain. And I think this could be part of that picture and could be put off. I don't think there's a great rush to jump into this, especially when Ed Miller writes that we're thinking about eminent domain. People rushing at it. And I think it's time to cool this off and take our time and get it right. And I would love to see the town own the whole bottom and not charge rents and shellfish. And I think it's a great idea, but not this piecemeal, not under pressure, not the way it's happening now.
thank you. All right, Michael, I'm going to give you the last word, but I'm going to let Will. Will's be the last question, and then Michael.
Quick question. I hope the selectmen, when they're negotiating, get a copy of the leases from the landowner to the oysterman, because that's going to determine the value. And if you're talking value, you're absolutely right. It's the income approach. It's water and mud. May have a lot of value, may not, but the leases determine what the value is. I think if the selectmen go with based on lot sales, they're being disingenuous and just trying to ram this thing through.
May I answer
really
that?
think the selectmen.
Okay, all right, she's going to answer this question.
Sir?
She'll respond.
Sir, it doesn't work like that with, the town leases, the town leases agriculture grants.
All night long. Can I just speak a little bit?
Yeah.
The person that just spoke here said it's the value of the leases. And so I'm saying, I don't care what the town leases are, what the current lease is between the person that's trying to sell this for whatever price it is, with the individual people.
So you're saying the purchase of that
Yeah.
acre, what was the purchase of the acre in that determines
Now now's your time to get it, because if they want to negotiate with you in good faith, you think they'd provide it to you.
I know the answer.
There's no leases. Okay, but Ellen, they want to answer it first, Michael. You're not on the board yet.
Yeah.
Cross your hearts. To the best of the town's knowledge. Okay, he will speak. He will speak at the end.
To the best of the town's knowledge, there are no leases currently being executed between the HDYLTA Trust owners and the farmers who have farms on their land. To the best of the town's knowledge, there are no leases.
Okay.
Now, other people might know differently.
Yeah. Michael?
I just have one more point to make about the value to the whole community besides the economic value. Right now we have a 208 plan coming down on us where we have to mitigate nitrogen. These aquaculture sites and the shellfishing industry produces 10 million oysters per year approximately over the whole town. And the amount of nitrogen that's mitigated just through that, okay, is a great benefit to our watershed. And that economically actually benefits the town moving forward. Because when they do these 208 plans, they're going to go back to when they initially did the nitrogen research, which I can't remember the date, 2004. I don't remember exactly the date when they first measured nitrogen. The growth in the industry since then will offset some of the nitrogen mitigation that we have to do as a town by law to comply with the Cape Cod Commission 208 plan. And so losing the aquaculture and the productiveness of the harbor, especially with oysters, but also clams, we will lose a lot of nitrogen mitigation, which is caused from the upland. So the whole town is putting nitrogen into the watershed, and these oysters that we are growing and selling and removing from the harbor are getting nitrogen out of the watershed. So there's an ecosystem services that we provide also that I just want to put out there.
That's true.
I just wanted to to make that known to the
I
audience.
call Indian Neck the blue lung of Wellfleet, and we discussed this earlier, that everybody stands to benefit from the water quality provided by all of that shellfish.
All right, Ginny, you had one question.
Also, I'd like to remind everybody that not only is it our biggest single industry, but it is not only not dirty, it doesn't hurt the environment, and it requires the environment to be really good. So people make money and they're not polluting.
All right, one last comment from
I just
you.
want to,
Go ahead.
hi there, I'm Jenny Parker, and I just wanted to follow up on the gentleman who made the comment about it being 18 farms and 18 individuals. Those farms can employ anywhere from 7 or more individuals per area. So I think that's one of the questions we're still working on. We actually have formed an organization to help, it's called Wellfleet Shellfishermen's Association, to help some of these outside industry pressures that we're experiencing. And one of the things we did in our last meeting was send out to all the grant holders there to get an idea of how many employees they have, how many kids they have in the school system, so they can have a bigger understanding that it's far more than 18 people that benefit. They're not including the wild harvesters. So hopefully by town meeting we'll have some of that information clear. But I think it's important to know it's not just 18. It's, I know Barbara's gone, but she said at least 7 people work on her grant. And Michael said identical too. So there's actually quite a few.
Some of that is in the document already. We already did that.
Thank you. All right, everyone, this is going to be at pre-town meeting. We won't be able to get into this depth of conversation, but I am sure this is good for a couple of nights at town meeting. So, get all your notes together. We were hoping that this could make it shorten town meeting, but hopefully it didn't prolong it. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and we will see you next week. John.